any individual creating presidential records must not use non-official accounts, unquote, unless messages are forwarded to an official account. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Khanna, who's a member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, thanks for being with us. So Jared Kushner's use of WhatsApp for official business, is it actually a national security risk, in your opinion? I mean, it is, as far as I understand, encrypted end-to-end.
It is, Anderson. There are reports that Jared Kushner has been using this to give sensitive information to MBS in Saudi Arabia. And as you know, Saudi Arabia is bombing Yemen and undertaking a lot of actions against dissidents. So there are large questions about what his relationship with MBS is and what information he's been giving the Saudi regime. But,
I mean, you don't have any evidence that do you have any evidence that those conversations have taken place or what the context is?
Well, there's public reporting that he has used WhatsApp to communicate with MBS. We don't know what the contact is. We do know also, based on public reporting, that Tom Barrack, who was the president's chair of the inauguration committee, has used private emails to talk about giving nuclear reactors to the Saudis. Here's why this matters, though. As you know, one of the largest humanitarian crises is taking place in Yemen. 14 million people may have famine. We're about to pass a war powers resolution in the House and the Senate. The question is the president going to sign it, or is he too beholden to the Saudis? These are deeply important questions about our national interest, and yet one wonders what communication is taking place with MBS and why this isn't being disclosed under the proper laws.
But aren't there often communications between people in the White House and foreign officials that are not made public? I mean, don't there have to be private communications?
Well, sure, but I mean, the irony of this is that the president ran his whole presidential campaign accusing Hillary Clinton of having a private server and having communications, and here you have something that's much worse. You have communications with foreign leaders on platforms that aren't official U.S. platforms, that put sensitive information at risk. No one is saying that they have to disclose every detail of those communications, but they need to be doing it on official government servers and preserving those records so that if there is inquiry, they can comply with that, and they haven't done that.
Right. I mean, there is an actual, Presidential Records Act, and Ivanka Trump still doing White House business, or at least according to Congressman Cummings, I think his information is several months old, but on a private email account, there's obviously the irony of, the president running on similar criticisms of obviously of Secretary Clinton. But so would it be not a violation of the Records Act if she used private email but then forwarded those emails to an official account so there's a record of it? I mean, the fact that there's no record of it seems like there's two issues. There's a security concern, and then the fact that there's actually no record of it.
I think they're both serious issues. One is, why is she using a private email account, or why is Jared Kushner using WhatsApp, which can be intercepted from foreign intelligence and which is putting sensitive information at risk? Separate from that, the law, as you point out, requires that these records be preserved. And if she's forwarding it to her official account and preserving that, then at least she's complying with that part of the law. But there are large questions whether that's being done. I mean, one of the things that was reported is that she hasn't been preserving those emails that she hasn't replied to. Well, that would be a violation of the law. And if anything, this president should have been aware of this law. I mean, he based his whole campaign on this law against Hillary Clinton.
It's also interesting because obviously Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, I mean, they still are making money from private, private businesses. Ivanka Trump is making money from the Trump Hotel. Is that information that also should be saved in official documentation?
Absolutely. Any information that affects any part of their job needs to be saved. And the reason we have this law is for transparency, Anderson, precisely for the reasons you say, that if there are potential financial conflicts of interest and if Congress wants to conduct oversight, then there is a record that the American people can consult. If they do it privately and that information isn't available, then the American people won't know if there are conflicts of interest. And so that's why it's deeply problematic that they aren't preserving these records or that they're conducting this communication on private email servers.
In terms of the White House's refusal, though, to turn over documents about the president's private conversations with Vladimir Putin, obviously it is of concern that we have no idea, the American public, other officials have no idea what actually was discussed between Vladimir Putin and President Trump, even at Helsinki, at this one-on-one meeting they had with interpreters only present. Normally there would be some sort of a readout, there would be other officials there, there would be some sort of at least general understanding of and specifically of issues that were discussed. But at the same time, shouldn't the president have the ability to have private conversations with Vladimir Putin or whomever without disclosing, every conversation to people in Congress?
Sure, Anderson, there should be some private conversation, but in this case, the president didn't have any of his own officials there. He didn't even have his Secretary of State. He didn't have national security officials. And even Republican colleagues of mine were offended when he said that he believed Putin more than our own intelligence officials, and that he said he believed that Putin didn't interfere with our elections, which is absurd for anyone looking at the evidence. So no one is saying that we need all the details of all his sensitive conversations, but we need to have an account of what was discussed and ask some basic questions. Both President Obama and President Bush in the past have complied with providing readouts and summaries of conversations with foreign leaders. If they want to claim executive privilege for certain sensitive parts, that's fair. But to say that they're not going to disclose any of the nature of those conversations, who was there, what was discussed, that's just being unreasonable.
Congressman.